My daughter held a help sign while I was deployed. Cheating Tales Lab's great viewers. From where are you joining us? Inform us. Let's begin today's story. Chapter 1: The Soldier's Foundation Duty, Honor, and Family. Were Jack Carter's foundation. At 34, ICE, a distinguished Army Ranger with 12 years of service, was recognized for his calmness under fire and surgical mission execution. In Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, his strategic brilliance and steadfast dedication saved countless lives. Third, his family revolved around Lauren Mitchell, whom he married 8 years earlier when she was a 23-year-old nursing student with auburn hair and emerald eyes that could melt his steely exterior. She chased him mercilessly in San Antonio throughout his leave. Her vivaciousness contrasted with his calmness. After months of being a national weapon, Morgan made him feel human again. Kurt loved Chloe, their 6-year-old daughter. Her mother's wild locks and father's steel-gray eyes and stubbornness were hers. Kurt wanted one last deployment to guarantee his family's financial security before civilian life because of Chloe. He planned to surprise Morgan when he returned with a military offer to teach new recruits at Fort Bragg. Natalie Brooks, Kurt's sister, always doubted Morgan. Diana, an Austin private investigator, could read people. She advised Kurt before his wedding that Morgan's willingness to marry a soldier she'd known for 6 months seemed strange. But Kurt, blinded by love and Morgan's cries about her traumatic childhood, dismissed Diana's warnings as overprotective. Kurt didn't know Morgan's desire wasn't romantic. A mother who cleaned office buildings and a father who left them when Morgan was 12 raised her in East Houston in poverty. She'd learned early that survival meant finding someone who could provide stability, and Kurt's military benefits and solid paycheck were as appealing as his rugged features. Morgan played loyal military wife flawlessly for the first several years of their marriage. She had attended base festivities, befriended officers' spouses, and portrayed a loving, stable home. However, Kurt's lengthier and more regular deployments made the illusion harder to maintain. Her loneliness and growing contempt at a life centered on someone else's work and patriotic beliefs she never shared were true. The change was gradual. What began as harmless talks with neighbors and friends became hazardous. Morgan began to regard Kurt's absence as freedom rather than sacrifice and his responsibility as neglect of their marriage. So she decided she deserved more than being a military woman waiting for a spouse who put country before family. Kurt spent weeks making sure his family was ready for his final deployment. He'd raised his life insurance, set up automatic bill payments, and hired a cleaning service to assist Morgan manage the house. He thought he was taking care of his family while away, unknowing that Morgan's requirements had changed to desires that no amount of planning could satisfy. Kurt whispered future promises to Morgan in their bed the night before deployment. He'd talked about buying a house near Fort Bragg, attending Chloe's school performances and soccer games, and aging together. Morgan said the right thing, but she kept thinking about his absence and freedom. Chapter 2: Seeds of Deception. Morgan's carefully composed mask began to shatter 3 months into Kurt's Eastern European deployment. The military wife support groups were oppressive, with women missing their spouses and counting days till their return. Morgan excused herself from base functions by citing work emergencies at the hospital where she'd returned to nursing after Chloe started school. Morgan initially met 38-year-old pharmaceutical sales professional Caleb Morgan at the hospital, where his charisma and fancy clothing stood out among the medical staff. Royce was smooth-talking, flamboyant, and all about instant pleasure. Unlike Kurt, he drove a red Corvette, wore a Rolex, and was confident since he had never risked his life for anything more than profit. Royce lived off reading people and exploiting their weaknesses. He saw Morgan as a target within days after their first meeting, perceiving her as a neglected military wife seeking recognition. He started with pharmaceutical regimes and then moved on to military marriage issues. "Your husband's deployed for 3 months." Royce's coffee break question was wonderfully balanced between sympathy and intrigue. "That must be hard, especially with a young daughter." Morgan opened out to Royce like never before. He heard her complaints about Kurt's strict routines and military mindset without judgment. He sympathized with her frustration at making all parenting decisions alone. Most significantly, he made her feel recognized and valued, unlike Kurt's practical affection. Before it was physical, the affair was emotional. Royce knew Morgan needed to feel chosen, not enticed. He let her propose their first lunch date, suggested meeting outside the hospital, and waited for her to start physical closeness. After dinner at an elegant restaurant 40 miles from base, Morgan felt like she was recovering her life, not compromising her marriage, when they kissed in his car. Kurt's letters and video conversations revealed a more risky deployment than he previously claimed. Morgan saw the tiredness in his eyes and heard the anxiety in his voice as his unit conducted secret operations he couldn't discuss. Instead of worrying about his safety, she was upset by his military secrecy, which she saw as another type of emotional estrangement. Chloe, alert as only children can, noticed her mother's conduct changing. Morgan stayed out later, used her phone more, and seemed distracted at bedtime. Morgan would use time differences or mission constraints when Chloe asked about phoning Daddy, without disclosing that she dreaded Kurt's calls, which disrupted her new life and drove her to be a dutiful wife. Royce introduced Morgan to his lifestyle to strengthen their bond. He took her to nice restaurants, purchased her jewelry she had to hide, and introduced her to non-military acquaintances. He imagined a life where she could be spontaneous, her wants came first, and love was measured in attention and luxury rather than duty and sacrifice. The psychological change was full and intentional. Royce convinced Morgan that Kurt's military service showed a fundamental fault in his character, an unwillingness to prioritize his family's emotional needs. He believed Kurt's continuous risk-taking indicated a death wish that would leave Morgan widowed and Chloe fatherless. Royce said Morgan wasn't unfaithful. She was shielding herself and her daughter from a man whose priorities were different. Morgan was comfortable leading a double life by Kurt's halfway point. She posted about missing her husband and supporting military families on social media while secretly preparing a life without him. She'd even started talking to a divorce lawyer, but she hadn't chosen when to file. Ironically, Kurt's last tour was better than any other. His unit had met its goals early, therefore there was talk of returning. Kurt counted down the days until he could surprise Morgan with his career move and early return, unaware that his wife was counting down her freedom. Chapter 3. Morgan became bolder in her deception as Kurt's deployment neared its end. She and Royce had a romance-like pattern, weekend excursions to Austin as friends, dinners at his place while Chloe was with babysitters, and ideas for a future without Kurt. Morgan thought she loved Royce, but she loved the idea of a life without military restrictions. Morgan didn't understand Royce was playing longer. He liked her strategically, not romantically. He learned about Kurt's military service, deployment schedules, and base security from their discussions. Morgan's pillow conversation had become Royce's source of financial benefit because Royce knew people who valued such information. The pharmaceutical sales job was respectable, but it perfectly hid Royce's more lucrative side business. He focused on talking to military families, especially those with deployment stress and marital issues. Morgan wasn't his first or last target. His flat had recording equipment that recorded their private discussions, and he was compiling Kurt's unit and mission information. Chloe has discovered ways to cope with her mother's growing absence. She called her Aunt Diana more often, feeling a problem at home but lacked the words to explain it. Diana saw Chloe's conduct change during calls. She seemed more reclusive, asked more questions regarding her father's return, and had nightmares about family problems. Diana's observations throughout her trips to Morgan and Chloe increased her suspicions. Morgan appeared more secretive, guarded about her schedule, and weirdly cheery for someone whose husband was in fighting. Diana saw new jewelry, Morgan's look changes, and his tightly guarded phone. Diana couldn't tell Kurt about her concerns without wrecking his marriage without proof. Kurt broke down in his 9th month of duty. Chloe unintentionally called Royce while playing with Morgan's phone as her mother showered. He replied expecting Morgan but was greeted by a 6-year-old girl who asked him who he was and why he had Mommy's phone number. The damage was done when Royce panicked and ended the call. Chloe, confused and inquisitive, asked Morgan about the phone caller. Chloe's concerns that anything was awry weren't satisfied by Morgan's explanations regarding work friends and erroneous numbers. Chloe tried to repeat the video call incident to comprehend the developing tension at home, worsening the situation. At 6 years old, she found Royce's number in Morgan's phone and called him to inquire why Mommy sounded upset after talking to him. Chloe left a long message on voicemail asking if the man on the phone was why Daddy couldn't come home. After receiving the communication, Royce realized Chloe was a major threat to his enterprise. A child's basic inquiry could reveal months of lies. He pressured Morgan to limit Chloe's information and find permanent answers. His options grew darker, from sending Chloe to live with relatives to making Kurt's deployment permanent to benefit them both. Morgan buckled under the strain of her daughter's suspicions and Royce's demands. She made blunders like leaving her phone unlocked, coming home with explanations that didn't fit her appearance, and most dangerously, letting Chloe overhear inappropriate conversations. Her carefully balanced life was crumbling, and she was too deceived to escape. In a moment of childlike lucidity, Chloe created a placard pleading for aid during her most vulnerable time. She felt something was amiss in their home but couldn't say what. Morgan took a photo to send to Kurt to illustrate how much Chloe missed him, but she didn't notice the sign Chloe had prepared, which would start the chain of events that destroyed Morgan and Royce's work. Chapter 4. Visible Message. Kurt received a Morgan message on his phone while cleaning his gun in the makeshift armory. The deployment had been difficult, but they were nearing completion. His unit had exceeded expectations, and early return was increasing daily. Kurt anticipated another usual house update before opening it. One photo showed Chloe holding a bright poster in their living room. Morgan wrote, "She misses you." However, Kurt's years of experience monitoring enemy communications and hidden threats immediately spotted something strange. Chloe's sign was covered in crayons and children's art. Help was obvious through the vibrant turmoil. Kurt chilled. His daughter was smart enough to understand the word's meaning yet not artistic enough to mistakenly make such a message. This was no coincidence or game. Chloe was communicating something she couldn't say explicitly, and Morgan sent the photo without recognizing its subtext, suggesting she was either unaware of their daughter's pain or convinced Kurt wouldn't notice. Kurt was on an encrypted line to Diana in minutes. His sister had always been his closest confidant, and her investigative talents had helped him handle delicate family problems in the service. Kurt abruptly told Diana to check on Morgan and Chloe. "Something's wrong." "Kind of wrong?" Diana's voice became professional instantly. Chloe signaled distress. "I can't explain over the phone, but watch them tonight." Diana trusted her brother's judgment. In their childhood, Kurt's ability to read perilous situations kept them safe amid his father's violent rages, so she trusted him. "We'll head over with an excuse about Chloe's birthday planning." Diana's unexpected presence confirmed Kurt's worst worries and added new ones. Morgan was anxious, defensive, and unprepared for unexpected guests. Chloe was withdrawn and clingy, telling Diana things Morgan would interrupt or redirect. Most telling were Morgan's phone, which buzzed continuously with messages she hastily silenced, and a bouquet of pricey flowers she claimed came from a grateful patient's family. Diana's detective skills revealed further subtleties. Morgan looked different with professional highlights, expensive jewelry, and fashionable clothes that didn't match a nurse's pay. New decorations and furnishings gave the house a different feel. Chloe's behavior was worst. She continued referencing Mommy's friend and asking when Daddy was coming home, as if she'd been told something different than Morgan told Kurt. Chloe's grief implied something more terrible than Diana's suspicions that Morgan was cheating. Offering to help Chloe with homework got her some time alone, and what she learned made her stomach flip. "Aunt Diana," Chloe whispered, "Mommy's friend comes over at night and locks my door so I can't leave. He spoke things about Dad that made Mama cry, but not sad. A different cry." Diana felt the consequences physically. Chloe felt alienated during sexual relationships, and Kurt-related conversations worried children. It was more than infidelity. This could endanger Chloe and Kurt. Diana called Kurt that night with life-changing news. She responded, "You need to come back now," with controlled rage. "Why?" Although Kurt knew the answer would destroy his family beliefs, he inquired. "Why?" Diana repeated, "She won't last." The words between them had importance beyond physical safety. Diana wasn't simply discussing Chloe's mental health. She warned Kurt that his daughter was in a psychologically damaging setting and that every day he was deployed worsened the damage. Kurt's world destroyed and rebuilt in a flash. The man who'd fought hostile fire without flinching shook his hands as the betrayal became evident. Morgan did more than cheat. She was traumatizing their daughter sufficiently to risk signaling her deployed father for help. However, Kurt wasn't any husband finding infidelity. The Special Forces operator knew psychological warfare, strategic planning, and precision targeting. His concentration moved from finishing his task and returning home to celebrate their future to something else. This mission had new goals: intelligence gathering, tactical preparation, and comprehensive child threat neutralization. Kurt requested emergency leave within hours, citing a family situation. His commanding officer, seeing Kurt's steely rage, expedited the paperwork without inquiries. The next night, Kurt took a ride home. He was different from the man who left 8 months before. What replaced the spouse and parent was harder and more risky. Chapter 5: Intelligence Gathering. Kurt's return to America began his most painstakingly planned military operation. He made an important decision instead of running home to confront Morgan. He would approach this as a covert mission requiring intelligence collection before action. Diana met him at a motel 40 minutes from base with files she'd prepared the week after their phone contact. His sister had used her professional resources to do preliminary surveillance on Morgan and found evidence of treachery beyond infidelity. Diana said her lover is Caleb Morgan, spreading photos across the motel table. Pharmaceutical sales rep, 38, single, Austin apartment owner. But now it gets fascinating. His finances don't match his lifestyle. He either hides income well or has illegal revenue streams. Kurt examined the surveillance photos objectively. Caleb Morgan appeared like a military wife targeter. Opportunistic, confident, polished. However, Kurt's analytical mind was already considering tactics beyond the personal betrayal. What about Chloe? Kurt asks. Diana's face clouded. My records show Morgan leaving Chloe with babysitters to see Lynch multiple times. The girl has nightmares, bedwetting, and anxiety. She asked me yesterday if Papa was dead and people lied to her. Diana's final revelation altered Kurt's mission. She discovered via her professional contacts that federal investigators were investigating Caleb Morgan for espionage, but no charges had been filed. His targeting of military spouses revealed he was gathering intelligence for more than personal gain. Diana asked cautiously if he's been asking Morgan about your deployments and unit activities. This might go beyond marriage betrayal. Within Kurt, something changed. He'd only felt such cold, calculated hatred in battle situations where enemy threatened American lives. If Caleb Morgan was using his wife to obtain military intelligence and traumatized his daughter, he guaranteed his defeat. Kurt monitored his family for 3 days with the same precision he used to follow hostile targets abroad. He recorded Morgan's habits, Lynch's visiting, and most crucially, Chloe's conduct in numerous situations. His observations validated his darkest fears concerning his child's psychological damage. Chloe was most upset when Morgan prepared Lynch's visits. The girl would clingily ask when her father was coming home and hide in her bed when Lynch arrived. Kurt noticed that Chloe had been raised to avoid adult activities, so she was aware of inappropriate behavior even if she didn't understand its full ramifications. Morgan's lie was exposed by surveillance. She'd constructed several social media accounts, told different tales to different friend groups, and even introduced Lynch to select acquaintances as her boyfriend while maintaining her military wife persona. The worst finding was when Kurt opened their shared financial accounts and found that Morgan had been giving Lynch military benefits, deployment pay, and life insurance information. Lynch had been helping her explore widowhood choices that maximized her financial gain, and the pattern suggested she was planning for a future without Kurt. Kurt's military training taught him that the most effective operations were those where the enemy didn't notice they were attacked until it was too late. He applied that approach to his domestic circumstances, but with adjustments to guarantee Morgan and Lynch pay for their betrayal beyond divorce. Kurt created a multi-layered plan to kill both targets and shield Chloe from additional harm. Phase 1 investigated Lynch's espionage and Morgan's cooperation. Phase 2 would involve persuading both targets to self-destruct. Phase 3 was the final showdown, where Kurt would divulge his entire knowledge and inflict repercussions that would prevent Morgan and Lynch from threatening another military family. Kurt transformed completely. The wonderful husband and father who'd deployed 8 months before was gone. A predator had detected threats to his child and was preparing to kill them with the same ruthlessness he'd used against enemy warriors. Chapter 6. The trap forms. Kurt's strategy started with a phone call. Using his sister's contacts, he got federal authorities investigating espionage to flag Caleb Morgan for a regular security audit. The beauty of this technique was that Lynch would never realize that his military conquest had an Army Ranger husband who'd returned early from deployment seeking revenge. Within days, federal officials began monitoring Lynch's finances, travel, and military ties. Pressure was mild but constant. Surprise visits to his employer, requests for income verification, and quiet questions from professional contacts regarding his actions. Kurt infiltrated Lynch's digital life using military intelligence expertise. Kurt had access to Lynch's correspondence, financial documents, and most critically, his discussions with Morgan thanks to a skillfully placed keyboard logger in his laptop during a routine theft. Kurt's findings validated his concerns. Morgan had provided extensive information about Kurt's unit, deployment plans, and base security protocols to Lynch, who was researching numerous military families. Lynch's recordings of his private discussions with Morgan were Kurt's most painful discovery. The man had recorded Morgan's hatred of military life, her desire to kill Kurt so she could collect his life insurance, and her willingness to provide classified information in exchange for Lynch's promises of a luxurious future. Morgan's treachery was revealed by the recordings.